I was humiliated $500 over a mailbox. The HOA slammed me with fines but couldn't remember where their own office stood. They called it order, I called it hypocrisy. Let me take you back. I never thought a crooked mailbox could cost me $500 until that letter showed up in June. The envelope sat heavy in my hand that morning, cream-colored with the HOA logo stamped in smug blue ink. It had been tucked into the very mailbox they claimed was unfit for duty, leaning just a little to the left after one too many seasons of soft ground and summer storms. I ran my thumb across the flap, the cicadas buzzing like a memory of younger days, and I thought, Lord, what could they want now? The paper inside was crisp formal. Violation mailbox, not in compliance. Fine, $500. I couldn't help but chuckle, though my stomach tightened. In all my years delivering letters from wet mountain haulers to new-built suburbs, I'd seen mailboxes slumped like old men and leaning like drunken sailors. This one, my own, wasn't half bad. I set the letter on the porch rail beside my chipped army mug. The coffee had gone lukewarm, but I sipped anyway. From across the street, Edith Moore was waving her wide-brimmed hat bobbing as she shuffled down her driveway to fetch her paper. "Morning, Hal," she called. "Morning," I hollered back, holding up the notice like a prize I didn't want. She squinted, adjusted her glasses. "Oh, don't tell me another letter," I nodded. $500 for a mailbox that's been here longer than some of these houses." Edith made a sound between a laugh and a groan. "Wouldn't surprise me. They fined me last year for tulips. Tulips how? Said the color wasn't on the approved palette. Can you imagine I could imagine? I'd seen this game before, played out in small towns all over petty rules enforced with clipboards and frowns as if keeping people in line gave them meaning. We stood a while in the sticky morning air talking low like conspirators. Edith told me how another neighbor, a widower 2 doors down, got a notice for leaving his trash can visible past noon on pickup day. They'd hit him with a fine he couldn't fight, and he ended up paying just to avoid the headache. "That's what they count on," I muttered. Folks rolling over signing checks, keeping quiet. Edith leaned on her cane. "Well, you never were the quiet type, Hal." She was right. Retirement had softened my schedule, but not my spine. My days were easy. Early coffee, a slow walk to the diner some mornings, radio humming old tunes in the garage. I'd earned that peace. And yet, here it was threatened by a crooked post and the tidy handwriting of a woman I hadn't even met yet, but already disliked. I read the letter again, tracing the words like they might change under my gaze. Non-compliance. Corrective action required. I thought about all those years I'd worn the postal blues checking boxes reporting damage, helping folks replace rusted hinges or warped doors. I knew the rules better than most, and this didn't smell like rules. It smelled like power. The cicadas droned, and somewhere down the block a lawnmower coughed to life. Memorial Day, flags still fluttered along the street, faded now in the Carolina sun. Mine drooped a little on its pole fabric, thinning from too many summers. I touched the edge of the notice, thinking of men who had stood straighter and suffered worse than a fine. Edith finally shuffled back inside, leaving me alone with the paper and the hum of insects. I sat back, let the rocking chair creak beneath me, and studied that old mailbox. Tilted, yes, but steady. The kind of tilt you only noticed if you went looking for faults. I muttered to myself, that mailbox has stood straighter than most men I knew. Something here doesn't smell right. I set the letter down, staring at the mailbox, whispering, "I'm not paying, not yet." By Tuesday morning, there she was striding up my driveway with that clipboard like it was the 10 Commandments. Heat lifted off the concrete in shivers, and the cicadas turned the afternoon into a steady electric buzz. Her SUV idled by the curb, glossy as a beetle, the air from its vents pushing hot exhaust that smelled faintly sweet. The door thunked shut, and she came up the walk like the ground was hers, heels clicking, sunglasses large enough to hide a poker face. The clipboard rode close to her chest, the way a preacher holds a Bible, and I thought, here comes a sermon I never asked for. "You must be Mr. Jennings," she said, stopping short of the porch step, like stepping onto my boards might contaminate her shoes. "Marla Kensington. I'm the HOA president." "I figured," I said. "You're the only one I've seen carry a clipboard like it's sworn into office." The smallest smile twitched and died. She flicked a glance at the mailbox post, then checked something off. "Your mailbox is out of compliance with our approved aesthetic standards. It leans, the paint is sun-faded, and the number font isn't within our guidelines." "It's numbers," I said. "They all read the same way." "Not in this community," she replied. "Standards are what keep property values high and neighborhoods pleasant." From 2 backyards over, I heard the metallic squeak of a gate and the soft thud of somebody pretending to water tomatoes. Porch blinds shifted across the street. The sound of gossip can move through wood like it has its own heartbeat. I set my coffee down, reached into the folder I'd brought out on purpose, and drew a yellowed copy of an old permit. County signed off when I put it in, 20 years ago. Built to spec. Door still swings true and the carrier can reach it without stepping off the curb. Marla adjusted her glasses. The lenses flashed the white of the noon sky. She didn't touch the paper. County standards don't matter here. HOA rules are higher. I let the silence lie a second. It's a useful old trick, say less and watch what the other person fills it with. She filled it with a speech about consistency and community. The words sounded memorized like she'd used them before on other porches that didn't welcome her. "Ma'am, I carried mail most of my life," I said. "I've seen fancy mailboxes collapse under the first hard frost. This one's seen hurricanes. It does the job. It does not do our job," she said, tapping the clipboard. The pen made a sharp, tidy sound like a judge's gavel for people who never made it to law school. "You received notice. You have until Friday to comply. What does that mean in your book? New post? Fresh paint? Different numbers?" "What?" "All of the above," she said. "And make it straight." She pantomimed a plumb line with two perfect fingers. Level, centered, tasteful black. No visible rust, no chipping paint, and the numbers must be in Baskerville. "I don't speak Baskerville," I said. "Does the post office?" Her jaw worked once, twice a small hinge in need of oil. "We're not discussing the post office, Mr. Jennings. This is about our standards." She wrote again. The SUV kept humming behind her dollars, whirring into the atmosphere. I could feel the eyes on us from over the fence's old North Carolina soundstage, two sparrows arguing, a dog sighing under a porch, the heat itself listening. Edith's screen door creaked. She stepped onto her porch with the slow gravity of a woman who'd earned her minutes. She didn't call out, only stood with one hand on the rail hat brim, shadowing her face. Support without shouting. I appreciated that. Marla followed my eyes and offered a serene smile at Edith, then turned back to me. "If you'd like recommended contractors, I have a list." She slid a glossy flyer from beneath her clipboard. "They understand our expectations." "I'll bet they do," I said, and I didn't mean it like a compliment. "You'll also find our office hours and address there. Fees for non-compliance are outlined on the back." I took the flyer without looking. The paper was the heavy, expensive kind you choose when you want people to feel the weight of what you say. "Let me ask you something," I said. "What happens if I fix it to the letter Baskerville and all, and it rains next week and the post leans again because the ground's soft? Is there a forgiveness clause for gravity?" She lifted her chin a notch. "If you fix it properly, it won't lean." 20 years of storms and summer heat disagree," I said. "So do North Carolina tree roots, Mr. Jennings," she said, and there was the tone-sweet tea poured over a warning cold enough to sting a tooth. "This is not personal, it's communal. Our rules apply equally. People who comply find we're very reasonable. And those who don't?" I asked. Her smile settled into place like a picture hung with a level. "Refuse and we'll place a lien on your home." Somewhere a bird startled out of a hedge. Edith's fingers tightened on her porch rail. I felt a pulse in my neck steady as the tick of a wall clock. I'd stood on too many stoops delivering certified letters to mistake what that sentence meant, how it sat in a person's stomach for weeks afterward. "You ever deliver the mail?" I asked, keeping my voice even. "Ever carry certified notices up to doors and watch a man who just buried his wife try to sign his name while his hand shakes?" Her lashes flickered. "I'm sorry for your experiences, Mr. Jennings. That's not relevant." "Everything's relevant," I said softer than she expected. "Especially how you treat people." Her pen scratched once more. She pressed the flyer into my hand. "Friday," she said, and took the step backward. "People take when they think they've won. We do prefer cooperation." "Everyone does," I said. "It's easier than listening." The SUV's locks chirped. She turned and walked away, clipboard hugged to her sternum like armor. The engine note rose as she pulled forward, then settled to a purr, where she parked crookedly, two tires kissing the gutter. She sat a moment, maybe writing up some neat little summary about the encounter. Maybe calling someone, maybe not. The fences found their voices again, two low whispers, a tisk, the snap of a clothespin. I watched the shimmer on the driveway, how the heat made it look like water. The mailbox leaned its familiar inch and a half, casting a short shadow like a crooked sundial, telling me it was time to do something more than grumble. Edith didn't call out. She just raised a hand, a small salute that said, "I saw. I'm here." I nodded back. That was enough. I looked down at the flyer, then finally reading the bold type the office address the commandments printed as community standards. Halfway through, a strange feeling prickled the back of my neck. Something out of place, like a missing stamp on a letter that still somehow arrived. The Lexus revved softly and rolled off down the street. I stood alone in the hum and the heat, the paper sweating in my hand. Hal picks up the HOA flyer Marla left behind. Frowns funny. Does this office even exist legally? Sometimes the truth hides in dusty drawers. Nobody bothers to open until an old postman like me comes asking. The county courthouse always smelled the same, like paper had seeped into the wood, like ink had taken root in the walls. Ceiling fans clicked overhead blades moving slow, pushing the warm June air around without really cooling anything. The portraits of sheriffs from years past stared down from their frames, all stern-eyed and mustached, as if daring a man to argue with the record. I signed my name in the visitor book and leaned on the counter. Tom, around the receptionist, a woman who'd worked that desk since disco was still on the radio, pointed toward the back. "He's in his office, Mr. Jennings. Try not to bury him under questions." Tom Willis was bent over a stack of plats when I stepped in, mid-40s tie, crooked glasses slipping down his nose, the kind of fellow who handled paper like it was fragile glass. He looked up and grinned. "Hal Jennings as I live and breathe. Retired, but still poking around." "Some habits don't fade," I said. "Need a hand figuring something out." He waved me toward the chair across from his desk. It creaked the way old courthouse chairs do, the kind that had held nervous farmers, hopeful newlyweds, and men trying to dodge jury duty. He pushed a candy jar across the desk. Peppermint. My granddad used to keep the same kind on his nightstand. I unwrapped one, let the sweet coolness sit on my tongue, and felt my blood pressure dip a notch. "All right," Tom said. "What's the trouble?" "Homeowners Association," I said, sliding the fine notice across the desk. "Claim my mailbox is out of compliance. $500. Tom winced. "That's stiff." "I thought so too. But here's my question. Can you pull their incorporation papers? Want to make sure they're operating on solid ground." He reached for the keyboard, tapped with 2 fingers. The monitor's glow made him squint. "Should be easy. Nonprofits are filed with the state zoning records here." He typed more, frowned, leaned closer. "Huh. Odd. What's odd file says pending, but the HOA's been active for 20 years. He clicked again. "And the building permit—" "Hang on." He stood, went to a tall cabinet, thumbed through folders that smelled faintly of mildew. He came back with a stack, set them down like a loaf of bread. "Half these records are stamped but not signed. I don't like that." I picked through the papers, hands steady from decades of sorting mail. One folder had the HOA's so-called office listed at an address that didn't match. "This location, they ever get an occupancy permit." Tom pushed his glasses up, pulled out another map. Lines drawn in green and blue zoning codes printed small. That spot was county-owned green space. I remember folks grumbling about it years ago. They poured a slab one weekend and threw up a prefab building by Monday. "That's what Edith said," I muttered. "Like they built it overnight." As if summoned, Edith's soft knock came at the door. She stepped in, hat still on, though we were indoors. "I figured I'd find you here," she said. I was remembering back when they put up that HOA office, folks whispered they never got the county's blessing. Just moved in and acted like kings. Tom laid the zoning map flat, smoothed the paper with careful hands. "Here," he said, tapping the block. "No occupancy permit filed. No variance approved. If this holds, their office is technically squatting on county land." I let out a slow whistle. "Which means every notice, every fine they sent from there—" "Could be contested," Tom finished. "Might even be illegal." He reached for his notary stamp, the kind with a heavy seal that bites paper like a cattle brand. "I'll notarize this copy for you. Chain of custody admissible in any hearing." The thunk of the seal hitting the paper echoed off the office walls. For a second, the whole courthouse seemed to lean in and listen. My pulse ticked like it used to on mornings I carried an important registered letter weight in my hand. Responsibility, heavy and sharp. I slid the notarized map into my old folder, tucking it between the fine notice and the peppermint wrapper. The air felt cooler somehow, though the fans hadn't picked up speed. "Appreciate you, Tom," I said. "This is more than I hoped." Edith's eyes shone like a woman who'd lived long enough to savor a good turn of fortune. "What now, Hal?" I stood the wood chair, groaning like it was sorry to let me go. "Now," I said, "we see how they like being out of compliance." By Friday evening, another letter arrived, this one stamped in angry red ink like a warning flare. The envelope sat on my kitchen table, heavy with malice, though it weighed no more than an ounce. I slid it open with my pocket knife, unfolded the sheet, and stared at the bold letters screaming across the page. Notice of Hélène, proceeding. My hand clenched before I set the letter flat, smoothing it like I used to flatten envelopes after rain showers on my old postal route. The red ink bled under the porch light when I carried it next door, glowing like it wanted to stain my fingers. Edith's porch smelled of honeysuckle and citronella candles, the kind you light in June to keep mosquitoes away, but never really trust. Folding chairs creaked as neighbors shifted in the twilight. Fireflies winked across the yard, and the cicadas droned a long song that made everything else seem quieter. Edith set down a tray of peach cobbler sweet buttery and warm from the oven and poured me a glass of iced tea, sweat dripping down the sides. She glanced at the paper. Another letter. Worse than before, I said, holding it out. They're threatening a lien on my house if I don't pay. Edith's face crumpled in a way that made her look both angry and tired. That's what they did when I planted tulips. Said the pink didn't harmonize with the neighborhood palette. I had to dig up my own flowers. She shook her head. Sometimes I wonder if they even like beauty. On the far side of the porch, a couple from down the block whispered. Kelly, still in his work boots, and his wife, who clutched her sweater tight even though it was humid. They leaned toward one another like conspirators. "We got cited last year," Mrs. Kelly murmured. "They told us to move our trash cans inside the garage or face a fine. We paid because, well, we were afraid." "That's their game," Edith said. "Fear. They count on it." I spread the zoning map across the little table, pushing aside cobbler plates to make room. The notarized seal caught the light, its embossed circle a quiet anchor. "This isn't just about mailboxes or tulips," I said. "Their office was built without the county's permission. They've been fining us out of a building that has no right to stand." The Kellys leaned closer. Mr. Kelly traced the map lines with a calloused finger. "So, all those fines could be challenged," I finished. "Every last one." A hush fell, broken only by the creak of Edith's porch swing and the hum of cicadas. Fireflies blinked like silent witnesses. I let the silence sit heavy as summer air. Then I spoke what had been burning inside me since Tuesday. "If they want a fight, I'll give them one. At the town hall." Edith set her glass down hard enough that the ice clinked. About time someone stood up to them. The Kellys traded a look that was half fear, half relief. Finally, Mrs. Kelly whispered, "Careful, Hal. They'll take your house if you push too far. I wasn't looking for buried treasure, just answers. But that ledger I found in the back closet was worth more than gold." The HOA office didn't look like much when I pushed the glass door open that Saturday morning. A hand-lettered sign taped crookedly to the window read, "Community Hours, 9:11 a.m." Inside, the air smelled stale, like someone had brewed bad coffee weeks ago and left the pot to sour. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, buzzing faintly, and dented metal filing cabinets lined the walls like soldiers who'd lost too many battles. Stacks of paper teetered on folding tables, the whole place held together by tape habit and intimidation. Tom Willis, the county clerk, had met me there on his day off. He looked out of place in his neat shirt collar, pressed sharp. "You sure about this, Hal?" he asked quietly as we stepped in. "Most folks just pay their fines and let it go. Most folks didn't spend 40 years delivering mail, keeping track of who lived where, what was owed, and when it was due," I said. "Records matter. If they're playing games with money, it'll show." Behind a cluttered desk sat the treasurer, a short man named Dennis with nervous eyes and a sweat-stained collar. He flipped through a thin stack of reports as if they were holy scripture. "Here's the annual budget summary," he mumbled, sliding a few pages forward. "You can review these. That's all we're required to show." I leafed through them slowly. Rows of numbers blurred together, but the emptiness between them was obvious. Vague categories like miscellaneous fees and renovations with no receipts attached. My finger tapped the page. "Where are the supporting documents?" Dennis coughed into his hand. "Records are consolidated. It's complicated. Not in the Postal Service," I muttered. "If a nickel was short, I could tell you whose route it fell from." Tom's eyes darted toward the corner of the room. A stack of binders slumped against a filing cabinet half buried under dusty envelopes. One of them was different, thick navy blue and without a label. I walked over the floor, creaking under my boots, and tugged it free from the pile. Dennis froze. Those are old drafts." I set the binder on the table and cracked it open. Inside lay pages and pages of ledger entries, the kind someone never meant for sunlight. The handwriting shifted from neat to frantic as the months went on. Office renovations, $12,000. Miscellaneous fees, $4,500. Community outreach, $8,000. No receipts, no explanations, just numbers slipping through cracks. Tom leaned over my shoulder, scanning quickly, his mouth set in a grim line. Without a word, he pulled his notary stamp from his satchel and pressed it onto a sheet, the ink soaking deep. "Keep these safe," he whispered. "This is more than sloppy bookkeeping. It's theft, plain and simple." I ran my finger down one column. They fined us $500 over mailboxes while pocketing thousands under miscellaneous. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. I closed the binder slowly, almost reverently, and slid the copies into my folder. As I turned to leave, my chest felt lighter, my steps surer. Evidence had weight, but the right kind of weight, like a well-packed mailbag slung over the shoulder, giving purpose with every step. I had something solid now, not just gossip and frustration. The door groaned open as I pushed it. But before I could step outside, a shadow cut across the threshold. Marla stood there in her crisp blazer clipboard tucked under her arm like a sword at rest. She didn't move aside, her lips curled in a smile that never touched her eyes. "Careful, Mr. Jennings," she purred. "Dig too deep, you won't like what you find." Saturday morning, I found the boldest words I'd ever seen taped to my front door, "Lien Proceeding." The paper flapped against the glass like it wanted to claw its way inside. Storm clouds pressed low over the neighborhood, turning the street a dim gray. The wind rattled the old mailbox, and the porch swing groaned with each gust. Inside, my radio played Johnny Cash, his voice low and steady, singing about walking the line. I pressed my hand flat against the notice, the red letters loud as thunder. They were coming for my home. My knees buckled. For the first time since this whole mess started, I felt the floor tilt under me. I carried the paper inside, set it on the kitchen table, and sat down in the same chair where I'd read my morning mail for 30 years. The chipped army mug still sat in the sink, yesterday's coffee ring dried along the bottom. I reached for my checkbook with a hand that didn't feel like mine. The pen hovered the number already forming in my mind, $500. A mailbox's worth of surrender. The storm growled outside, branches brushing the windows like skeletal fingers. I thought about all the years I'd worked roots and weather just like this, carrying letters through snow and sun, believing in the simple promise that mail got through, that rules had meaning. And now, here I was ready to buy back my dignity for the cost of a cheap used car. A knock pulled me back. I pushed the checkbook closed and shuffled to the door. Edith stood there, rain bonnet tied under her chin, holding a pie tin wrapped in foil. The smell of cinnamon and apples rose up like comfort itself. She stepped inside without asking, her shoes squeaking on the mat. "I heard," she said softly, setting the pie down. "They finally taped the lien notice, didn't they?" I nodded, too ashamed to speak. She caught sight of the checkbook on the table and the half-written line trembling under my pen. Her eyes sharpened. "How, Jennings? Don't you dare." "It's just $500, I said, my voice thin. "Cheaper than losing the roof over my head." She sat across from me, folded her hands like she was about to pray. "If they break you, the rest of us fall next. That's what they're counting on." Fear spreads faster than crabgrass. But courage? Courage spreads too. The storm hit hard, then rain pelting the windows. I stared at the check, my name scrawled in the corner, the ink bleeding faintly from my damp fingers. My chest ached with the weight of it all, years of quiet living, all threatened by a clipboard queen and her crew. I took a breath, steadying myself the way I had before delivering bad news on my old route. Then I tore the check clean down the middle. The sound was sharp, final, like a lock snapping open. "I won't let them scare me out of my home." I said the words rising from somewhere deeper than my lungs. Edith's eyes glistened, but her smile was fierce. Before we could say more, the phone rang its bell loud against the storm. I picked up breath, still ragged. "How?" "It's Tom," came the steady voice on the other end. "Town Hall Tuesday. Bring every scrap of evidence. You'll need it." The room smelled of coffee wood polish and tension thick enough you could slice it with a butter knife. Folding chairs scraped the floor like restless crickets. The old fluorescent lights hummed, and a microphone on a rolling stand let out a quick squeal that made everyone flinch. Someone had set up a card table along the wall with pies, pecan chess, and a stubborn lemon meringue collapsing under the heat. The flags hung straight as soldiers behind the dais. Sheriff Langston stood in the back, hands folded, badge catching the light when he shifted. You could feel the town lean forward as one body waiting to see who'd blink first. Marla took the front with her clipboard like it was a scepter, and the room her court. She wore the kind of smile that doesn't travel past the lips. "This meeting will come to order," she said, and the microphone popped for emphasis. "We're here to address a repeated case of non-compliance with our community standards." Her eyes found me where I sat in the second row. A few neighbors turned to look two faces careful. Edith squeezed my elbow and nodded once. Tom stood near the projector with a stack of copies pressed to his chest. I felt the weight of my folder on my knees and the familiar calm that used to come right before I knocked on a door with registered mail shaky folks on the other side, but the letter had to get through. Marla tapped the clipboard. Mr. Jennings's mailbox leans and fails to meet the approved aesthetic guidelines. He has ignored notice and refuses corrective action. The board has initiated lien proceedings as outlined in our bylaws. In a community built on standards, there must be consequences for disregard. Murmurs rippled. I stood smoothing the front of my shirt. I appreciate standards, I said, voice steady in the squeaky room. I lived by them 40 years in the Postal Service, but the power to enforce standards has to come from somewhere real, from a place that's legal and accountable. She raised an eyebrow. Our authority is not in question. I think it is, I said, and nodded to Tom. He dimmed the lights with a snap, and the projector threw a square of light onto the pull-down screen. The first image came up a zoning map, county seal in the corner lines neat as a hymn. Gasps lifted in the dim room. This, I said, pointing, is the parcel where the HOA office sits. According to county records, there's no occupancy permit, no variance. That building was never approved to be there. The room shifted, people sat taller, craning to see. The microphone gave another small squeal. Marla half laughed a brittle sound. Irrelevant, she said into the static. We are discussing a mailbox. We're discussing authority, I said. And where yours comes from. I held up the notarized copy. This was stamped by the county clerk. Chain of custody is intact. If your office isn't permitted, what exactly empowers you to fine anybody? Tom clicked. The next slide appeared a scan from the ledger. Handwriting sloped across the page, the ink pressed deep. Office renovations, $12,000. Miscellaneous fees, $4,500. Lines and lines of numbers without a single receipt to stand behind them. A low wave of voices rolled through the hall. Someone hissed. Someone else let out a short, startled laugh, the kind that turns into a cough. The pie table ruffled as a draft shivered under the door. Marla leaned hard into the microphone. This is an ambush. These documents were obtained during community hours, I said, as a member's legal right. The county notarized copies. I let the quiet lengthen until I could feel it pulling the room tighter. We've been fined from an office that doesn't exist in the eyes of the county, and money has been taken under categories that don't explain where it went. That's not standards. That's abuse. A man in the back, Mr. Kelly in his work boots, said, We paid for a trash can citation last spring. Where'd that go? His wife touched his sleeve, eyes shiny in the dim. Edith stood without the microphone and spoke plain. They made me dig up my tulips because pink wasn't on their chart. I did it. I shouldn't have. We all gave in because we were tired. She turned to me. Not this time. Marla's smile cracked. None of this changes the fact, she said, voice rising, that Mr. Jennings's mailbox leans. The rules are rules, require compliance. I took a breath and met the room where it was not where I wished it would be. My mailbox leans, I said. So does the truth when you push it hard enough, but it springs back if you give it air. We all deserve air. Tom clicked again. The ledger page zoomed closer, big as a billboard now. The entries looked messier the more you looked like a lie, unraveling under light. I turned toward the back. Sheriff Langston hadn't moved much at all, just that badge winking when he shifted his weight. Sheriff, I said, if an office has no occupancy permit, does any authority it claims from that space hold water? He let the silence sit long enough that the fans seemed to tick louder. Then he stepped forward slow as a clock hand and the floor creaked under his boots. He didn't take the microphone. He didn't need it. Without occupancy permit, their office holds no authority. The crowd broke like a wave on rock. Voices rose, some shocked, some relieved, some angry, and suddenly brave. A few clapped. One of the pies slid sideways on its paper plate and took a dive, and nobody even noticed. A neighbor in a rotary polo whistled low. A woman near the aisle put her head in her hands and laughed like she might cry. Marla turned red high on her cheeks. This is slander, she snapped the microphone, spitting her words back at her. You can't come in here with stolen papers, and notarized, Tom said, lifting the stamped copy. Public record. And county land is county land, Sheriff added, not bothering to raise his voice. If a structure sits there without the right paperwork, that's a problem bigger than a mailbox. I felt something inside me unclench a knot that had lived under my ribs since June. I looked around at the faces people I'd brought letters to condolences to tax bills and birthday cards. People who had paid and kept quiet and hoped for peace. They were standing now, one after another, not shouting so much as pushing air in the same direction. Marla sputtered, "This is slander. You'll regret this," as neighbors chant. Refund. Refund. They fined me over a crooked mailbox, but in the end, that mailbox stood straighter than their whole office. It was a bright July afternoon, the kind of day when the cicadas hummed steady and the air smelled of cut grass. A month had passed since the showdown at Town Hall, and the neighborhood looked different now, lighter somehow. No more HOA patrols creeping by, no clipboard shadows, just families setting up lawn chairs and kids chasing each other with paper plates in their hands. My front yard had become the stage. Folding tables groaned with fried chicken peach cobbler and pitchers of sweet tea. Edith waved folks over with her easy smile, tending her flower pots between refills of iced lemonade. Tom arrived carrying a stack of papers from the county, but today even he looked more neighbor than clerk. "Hal," he said, clapping my shoulder. "The board's dissolved. County audit stripped them clean, every fine voided. You're free and clear." The words felt good, though the real victory was watching the neighbors laugh without glancing over their shoulders. We'd all been under Marla's thumb, but now she was nowhere to be seen. Rumor had her holed up in that office the county condemned, the same building they once used to issue their threats. Sheriff Langston passed by, later tipping his hat as he helped himself to pie. Law stands taller than any clipboard, he reminded the crowd. Folks clapped like it was Sunday service. Edith pulled me aside, pressing something into my hand, a carved wooden flag painted red and blue. "For your mailbox," she said. "Stood straighter than the lot of them." I swallowed hard, thinking back to that first fine notice. $500 over a tilt no one but Marla cared about. That mailbox had become my line in the sand, and now it gleamed like a medal. Together, Tom and I fixed the carved flag onto the post. The neighbors gathered round as if it were a ribbon cutting. I raised my hand and said simply, "This one stood taller than their office ever did." Cheers broke out, glasses raised, and someone turned up an old country tune on the radio. Children darted between our legs, chasing fireflies. For the first time in months, laughter outshone fear. Later, as the tables emptied and the evening cooled, I walked to the mailbox. Its shadow stretched long across the grass, steady and sure. I thought of the fines, the threats, the lien taped bold on my door, and then I thought of Edith's cobbler Tom's quiet help at the courthouse and the sheriff's nod when the truth came out. Community had been the answer all along. When the crowd thinned, a neighbor handed me an envelope. Inside was a single note from the interim committee the county had appointed, "No fines, just thanks." Simple words, but they felt heavier than any penalty Marla had ever threatened. I placed the note inside the new mailbox, shut the door with a click, and smiled. The cicadas sang. Edith's porch light winked across the street, and for once everything stood straight. The summer afternoon faded into the kind of quiet only a small town knows, with neighbors resting easy and laughter lingering on the breeze. What began with a crooked mailbox ended as proof that when rules are twisted, it takes courage and community to set them straight. In the end, justice isn't loud or flashy, it's steady, like a porch light glowing through the night. And perhaps it's never too late to stand shoulder to shoulder with those around us, guarding the homes and the dignity we share.